mean, the way that you describe children and the way that you describe children's play, or the way that Faith Gust describes children's play, it is something obviously quite complex. This is something that I think a lot of, I mean, if you look at it in those terms, can be almost quite frightening for a theatre artist, to have to kind of reach to that level, in a sense, to meet the children on their playing ground.
Yeah, I think it is challenging. I've never thought of it as challenging in the way you describe it, but it is challenging to actually meet on a stage, and I think every performer will have felt, if you have done participatory theatre, the overwhelming feeling of, for instance, losing control. Because if there's 20 children in this room and you are going from A to B and you want to get them there, and suddenly something happens, then you lose control. So that's a challenge, and that's a way of being sensible to meeting them, and at the same time the skills of improvisation is important. You have to be able to be there and to take whatever comes. And of course, all your work on beforehand has to do with trying to control it and at the same time keeping the event open. So the balance between control and chaos is also always very present.
Is there a danger of meeting these creative, wild, sort of intense little beings, all of these children? Is it a danger that coming in with a kind of a piece of theatre where you've got an aim, you've got the story that you want to tell, or you want to get to a certain point, that you somehow kind of imposing that on them, that it becomes a kind of doctrine, or an that you dictate something to the children?
We have had the discussion recently, the seminar, we arranged a seminar called Democracy in Participation, and what was important, as you say, that there's always the question of the power balance. First of all, and this is a cliche, but they never chose to come to the theatre, unfortunately. They are guided by their parents or by school. And also the power relationship between adults and children, where adults are superior and children are taught to obey the adults. And this, of course, is something that you can't escape in the theatre. And I think it's naive to believe that you can, but you have to know about it, and you can try to work around it and try to be something else than a teacher, for instance, or a parent. And I think that the theatre can offer this. But that means also that the artist has to be aware of this very dimension of participation. And this is also a larger debate in relational aesthetics field, where the discussion of, is participation actually a democratic, free process, or is it just a tyrannical, manipulative practice where we meet and we have fun and nobody actually asks any critical question? That's a discussion going on between Claire Bishop, I believe, and Bourriot a long time ago, but still going on. What are the ethical dimensions of participation? And I think that within children's theatre this question is even more important because of the power balance.
I mean, another related question to that would be, does in terms of dealing with difficult themes, I've been interviewing a lot of people asking the question, what themes can you talk about? What subjects can you deal with for young audiences? What are the limits to what you can say to whom? And if we bring that into the realm of participatory theatre or interactive theatre, there's another question that pops up in my head, which is the form a kind of emancipatory form? Does it help the kids to deal with a difficult subject, or does it make that difficult subject closer and more dangerous?
Oh, I think the question is both yes and no. It depends on the artistic knowledge of the artist, I think, because every participatory form can be dangerous and imposing and even threatening, and perhaps even leaving all the group crying, or it can be brilliant. So that has nothing to do, I think, with participation and non-participation. That's how the artist turns or treats the subject. So it's a matter of artistic skill, I think, not of participation or not.
Why do you think interactivity is so important for young audiences?
Well, I don't actually.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a critical discussion about participation. I think that it's a trend, we see it, and we see it in the media, in the social media. We see participation in kindergartens and in schools. In Norway, there are paragraphs saying children have the right to participate in deciding what they have to do in the kindergarten. And it's also a human right for children by the UN, so it's a right children have. And when that is so, and when that's the case, we need to know and be able to differentiate between different forms and different goals. So when we, for instance, I saw a performance or a dance show performance where they said that it's participation, it's interactivity, children are co-creators of this performance. And I took my son, and in the middle of the performance, some of the children were chosen to go up on stage and jump on this funny floor where colors spread when they jumped. So it was really beautiful, and I could see that it was really fun for those who could actually were chosen to participate. Whereas my son, he was a bit young, so he wasn't chosen, probably because of that. But for him, he broke down like I've never experienced before, and had to carry him out, and he was crying his heart out because he had expected to be included. And of course, not always should a child be included, but the artist hadn't thought about who to choose, what about those who choose, what are their expectations, how do we go about making only a few subjects or a few children participants. So in participation, the ethical dimension of theatre and the power relationship becomes very obvious. And for my child, or my son, the performance was over. We went back and he cried his heart out, and we went back and we saw it, and he had to jump. He got to jump on the floor later on. But he had such a great time until then, and then no more. So it's quite serious, I think, when you invite people in. So I think it's important to know what you do when you do it, and to try to do your best. And to do your best, you have to know what you're doing. So it's a circle there.
Yeah. Let's move on to talking about the writer specifically.
Yes.
A writer who is interested, a playwright who is interested in writing interactive theatre, participatory theatre, what would they need to consider and think about when they begin that process?
Well, you asked me that question on beforehand, and I tried to think about this because we haven't worked with writers in that way, even though 3 of the or actually all 4 have been written, but they have been written, I think, during working with or making the performance. So my first thought was that they need to try out their material with real children to see, do they respond to my material the way I think they do, or what actually happens if I write this? Because that has been a method during our SceSam project, to try to expose the artists to groups of children, different groups at different times of the project, to see how is the dialogue, how do you deal with this meeting the children in a room. So that would be my first advice. Get hold of a group of children. And also, of course, it's sort of a I guess a quite practical writing, that one of our artists, director Hilde Brinkmann, she made an adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, and she has written also talked about herself, the techniques she discovered that the actors have to use to control the children, and that can be put in the lines you write for the characters, and the way you place the characters in the room, and of course what questions do you ask? Because if you ask a question you would like to know the answer to, well, then it's okay. But if you ask a question that you actually don't care about getting the answer, well, then don't write it. So there are simple, like, adjustment things you can do. That's more on a technical level.
But we were interested in the technical level.
In the technical level,
I mean,
yeah.
These details are, I think, are really interesting, hopefully, to the people who are watching this.
Yes, and also then I think that to find a concept, or like on a conceptual level, if you can say that in English,
yes,
that you actually think, okay, why do I want participation? How why actually artistically, what will it give my play or my performance? What are the reasons I want it? And how do I actually work that into the text I write?